Some people are born under the spotlight, some are welcomed with applause. But Ben was born in silence. In a small mountain town where the crow of a rooster travels farther than the sound of a dream. A place where if you dared to shout out your ambitions, no one would listen. Because here, people survive on reality, not on dreams. And yet, in that quiet, forgotten town, a fire was lit. A fire that burned in the heart of a 20-year-old named Ben. A flame that flickered but never went out, not for a single moment. Ben came from an ordinary family, nothing glamorous. His father worked as a mechanic, coming home each day with grease-stained hands and tired eyes. His mother cleaned houses, moving silently through the homes of people far richer than they would ever be. Life was hard, predictable, cyclical. But amid that exhausting routine, one person refused to accept a life of limits, Ben. And one little girl never took her eyes off him, his 10-year-old sister Sophie, whose gaze sparkled with wonder. To her, Ben wasn't just a big brother. He was a miracle in motion. He had no wealth, no powerful connections, no shortcuts. But what he did have was a dream. Not to be a doctor or an engineer like the other kids in town. Ben dreamed of becoming a businessman. No, not just any businessman, a creator of a restaurant empire. A brand that would one day stretch across borders and languages. People laughed. They scoffed. After all, how could someone with an empty fridge and unpaid tuition build a future like that? But maybe that's exactly why he dreamed so big, because when you start at the bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. So where did he begin? Not with money, not with status, but with curiosity. He started by washing dishes in the local diner, smiling at customers, taking mental notes, watching how food was made, how the owner managed staff, how patrons reacted to every flavor, every detail. Each day was a lesson. Every dollar in tips was a spark of hope. And every time someone told him he was chasing a foolish fantasy, he smiled and whispered to himself, "Thank you. You just gave me one more reason to keep going." Then came that winter night. Everyone else in town was asleep. Ben sat by his window, scribbling furiously into a worn notebook. He was sketching the first design for his dream, a restaurant that would touch hearts, not just fill bellies. Outside, snow. Inside, cold. But in his heart, a fire raged. He didn't know when that dream would come true. But he knew one thing for certain. If I don't build it, no one else will build it for me. That night, Ben made himself a promise. One day, Sophie will sit in my restaurant, order her favorite dish, and proudly tell the world, "The man who built this place is my brother." That night, the small town where Ben lived sank into an unusual silence. No footsteps echoed outside. No headlights swept past the window. Only the soft rustling of the wind across the worn rooftop and the steady ticking of the wall clock remained. The kitchen in Ben's house still glowed with a warm light. In that tiny space, just big enough for a small table and 2 old wooden chairs, Ben sat across from his father. It wasn't the first time they'd shared a quiet evening together, but this night, this one felt different. Ben looked at his father, the man who had spent a lifetime hunched over engines, scraping together every penny from grease and sweat, and his heart grew heavy. He was about to say something that could change everything. A dream far bigger than this town, far bigger than anything his family had dared to imagine. He hesitated, then finally spoke. "Dad, I know this might sound crazy, but I can't stop thinking about it. I want to build a restaurant chain, not just a small eatery, but a real brand, something that could go global. I want to create a place where people don't just come to eat, but come to feel something, to remember. I want to become a successful entrepreneur, change my life, and maybe even change ours." The room fell into a deep silence. His father didn't speak. He simply sat there, calloused hands folded together, eyes staring not just at Ben, but through him, through the old table, through the years and struggles etched into these walls. Then at last, he spoke, his voice rough but steady, worn from decades of labor. "Ben, dreams are the most valuable thing in this world. But do you know something? They aren't free." He paused. Ben's eyes widened. "Not free?" he repeated, not fully grasping what his father meant. His father continued, slowly but firmly, "You can say you want to fly high and go far, but to touch the sky, you must start with your feet on the ground. You can't build $1 million restaurant if you've never washed a single plate. You can't lead hundreds if you've never humbled yourself to serve others." Everyone has dreams, but not everyone has the patience to take the smallest steps first. Are you ready for that, Ben? His words were not rejection, nor were they praise. They were a mirror showing the raw truth, that dreams, no matter how beautiful, don't come knocking. They must be built inch by inch with both hands through pain, lessons, and failures. Ben didn't respond. His heart pounded in his chest. A whirlwind of emotions rushed through him, some disappointment, yes, for not hearing encouragement. But something else stirred deeper, a new fire, stronger and more real. The fire of someone who is about to walk a real path. No longer just a dreamer, but a young man about to take his first step into a long, uncertain road. His father stood, walked over, placed a rough hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, "If you're serious, start with the smallest thing. One day, you'll understand why that matters." That night, Ben couldn't sleep. He didn't stare at the ceiling like he usually did. He stared into himself at everything he lacked, everything he needed to learn. In his mind, he saw grand kitchens, bustling diners, glowing signs with his name. But this time, the dream wasn't just fantasy. It had shape. It had weight. And it began with a single piece of advice, a serious look, and a sleepless night. Ben's journey had officially begun, not with a bang, but with a simple truth from a father who knew that to rise high, you must first learn how to stand. The first opportunity, selling bread. That morning, Ben stepped out of the house with a thought looping over and over in his mind. Where do I begin? He looked around the town, a place that hadn't changed much in years, but today it appeared to him like an unexplored map, waiting to be decoded. Then he noticed something small but meaningful. Every morning, people in town had to travel far just to buy fresh bread, something everyone needed. Yet no one sold nearby. An idea sparked. Not something grand. Not a luxurious restaurant with hundreds of dishes. Just bread. Warm, crisp, fresh out of the oven bread. Ben didn't hesitate. He went straight to the oldest bakery in town, a place everyone knew, but not everyone dared to walk into with a proposal like the one he was about to make. It was the shop of Mr. Anderson, a widower known for his gruff manner, who lived alone, but whose baking skills were unmatched. Ben stood at the door, took a deep breath, and knocked. When Mr. Anderson opened it, his eyes were filled with suspicion. "What do you want at this hour?" His voice was raspy, irritated even. But Ben didn't back down. "I want to sell bread," Ben said. "I don't have any capital, but if you let me take some bread each morning, I'll deliver it to people in town. I'll pay you at the end of the week, and if I can't sell it, I'll work it off." Silence filled the room. Mr. Anderson looked at Ben for a long time. He didn't just see a young man, he saw a reflection of himself years ago. empty-handed, bold, craving someone to believe in him. Finally, Mr. Anderson sighed. 1 week, just one. If you disappoint me, this shop won't open to you again. Ben bowed in gratitude, heart pounding in his chest. He had nothing, no money, no experience, just a dream and the small trust of an old baker. But from that moment, he knew this was his first opportunity. Not a big one, but enough to begin. And sometimes the greatest empires begin with nothing more than a loaf of bread. The first step to success. That morning, Ben wasn't just carrying loaves of bread in an old canvas bag. He was carrying hope, burning passion, and a promise to his father that he would make it, even if he had to start from nothing. The streets were still asleep, the mist drifting lazily like it didn't want to leave. Ben went door to door, gently knocking, flashing a sincere smile, and offering something unexpected. Would you like to try a piece of fresh bread? I just want to share something truly good with this town. No one could say no to a young man with eyes that bright. Each sample, carefully sliced and handed out with heart, felt like a morning gift to the townsfolk. People tried it and were surprised. It was better than they expected. Soft, warm, with the rich scent of whole wheat. Within a single morning, every loaf was gone. That afternoon, Ben returned to Mr. Anderson's bakery. He carefully wrapped the day's earnings in a small envelope, placed it on the counter, and said humbly, I kept my promise. Mr. Anderson stared at Ben for a long moment without a word. But in those aged eyes was a flicker of light respect mixed with quiet surprise. He nodded slowly, then turned and walked away. No more words were needed. But from that moment, a partnership was born not on paper, but through trust, hard work, and saving every penny. From that day on, Ben woke up at 4 a.m. sharp. While the town was still deep in slumber, he threw on a worn-out coat, pulled a cap over his head, and walked the cold gravel path to the bakery. In his hands was a frayed wicker basket, but in his heart, unbreakable steel. He didn't miss a single day. Neither rain, wind, nor exhaustion could stop him. Every day was a battle against himself, against sleepiness, laziness, and even the skeptical looks from others. But Ben didn't care. He knew exactly where he was going. And he knew if he didn't give it everything he had, no one else would do it for him. For 2 whole months, Ben sold bread, delivered it door to door, asked for feedback, and refined his approach. He learned how to start conversations, how to earn trust, and most of all, how to persist without pause. Every cent he earned, he saved. No wasting money, no hanging out, no fancy meals. His mind had one clear goal: buy a cart. A small tool, yes, but one that could carry more bread, reach more people, and above all, prove that he was moving forward. And then it happened. With the money he had saved from every loaf, every early step, Ben finally bought his first pushcart. It wasn't new. It wasn't fancy. But to Ben, it wasn't just a cart, it was a symbol of belief, effort, and the beginning of something far greater that was just starting to unfold. A new idea, baking his own bread to boost profits. One foggy morning, the town was cloaked in mist as Ben, like every day, pushed his cart full of bread to his usual street corner. It was colder than usual, yet the bread sold out quickly. As he packed up, Mrs. Louise, an elderly customer who came by every morning, lingered a little longer than usual. She looked at Ben and gently offered a thought that would soon change everything. Have you ever thought about baking the bread yourself? At first, it sounded like a casual remark, but something about it stopped Ben in his tracks. He chuckled awkwardly. Me? Bake bread? I don't even know how to turn on an oven. But as Mrs. Louise walked away with a soft smile, she left behind a simple yet powerful sentence. Sometimes all it takes is to begin. That night, Ben couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in his mind. He thought about the money he had to share with the bakery, about the rainy days when deliveries were late, about Sophie's innocent question, "When will you have your own bakery, Ben?" And he realized if he didn't start with this small step, how could he ever build the dream? Ben jumped out of bed in the middle of the night. For the first time, he searched how to bake bread. On his cracked old phone, he watched hours of videos by bakers from all over the world. He took notes, carefully writing down every ingredient and step. The next day, he went to the local library and borrowed 3 dusty old books on baking. He devoured every line like he was tasting a new world, a world of aromas, oven temperatures, dough textures, and precise techniques. In the first week, he failed. Burnt bread, dough that didn't rise. The kitchen was filled with the smell of mistakes. His mother just shook her head and said, "Are you trying to burn the house down, Ben?" But quietly, she cleaned up behind him. Sophie patted him on the back and whispered, "It's okay. You're Ben. You always figure it out." And Ben knew he couldn't give up now. He kept going. Night after night, he became friends with the oven, with flour, with yeast. His hands grew calloused, burned more than once, but his eyes, they sparkled more each day. He wasn't just learning to bake. He was learning patience, resilience, and how not to let the flame of belief be snuffed out by burnt crusts. After a week, his first homemade loaves were ready. Still simple, not perfect, but their scent carried something new hope. So instead of picking up bread from Mr. Anderson's shop, Ben placed a few of his own loaves on the cart. He offered samples. Customers raised eyebrows. "You baked these? Really? They taste different." Not everyone loved them immediately, but they looked at Ben with a new respect. The kind of respect reserved for those brave enough to step into the unknown with heart. And in that moment, Ben realized selling bread was just the beginning, but baking it himself, creating something that carried his name, his effort, his dream, that was how real change begins. When the idea of baking his own bread took shape in Ben's mind, he knew he needed a mentor. And the first person he thought of was none other than Mr. Anderson, the aging bakery owner, full of wisdom and experience. Ben approached him with eyes full of hope and a heart burning with ambition. "I want to learn from you," Ben said, his voice trembling but resolute. Mr. Anderson raised an eyebrow, sighed, and shook his head. "Baking isn't easy, kid. Many have come and gone, leaving behind nothing but flour and failure." But Ben stood firm. He looked the old man straight in the eye. "I'm not here just for myself. I want to help your bakery too. And I promise I'll never forget what you've done for me." Maybe it was that look, a mix of youthful foolishness and raw sincerity, that made Mr. Anderson change his mind. The first lessons were a brutal battle. The dough was too tough, the yeast didn't rise, Ben's hands blistered, and the kitchen was constantly filled with smoke. There were days when Ben felt like giving up. But each time he did, his father's voice echoed in his mind. "Dreams aren't free, son. You have to pay with sweat and failure." Then one morning, after countless sleepless nights and dozens of failed batches, something miraculous happened. A loaf of bread emerged from the oven, golden, warm, soft, and fragrant, like a dream come to life. Mr. Anderson took a bite and remained silent for a long time. Finally, he nodded. No praise needed. Ben knew that nod meant everything. From that day on, Ben's humble kitchen became more than a place to cook dinner. It became a warm little bakery where his mother kneaded dough with skillful hands, and Sophie, his little sister, joyfully wrapped each loaf like she was handling magic. Though poor in possessions, their home was now rich with love and hope. Ben began to innovate not just plain bread, but sweet rolls and cookies, treats the town had never tasted before. People flocked to buy them not just for the flavor, but because they could feel the care baked into each bite. Every loaf told a story, a piece of a dream baked to life with faith. But like any journey upward, the storm wasn't far behind. One day, just across the street, a new bakery opened, modern, shiny, full of expensive equipment and stylish branding. The owner, Eric, a young man with deep pockets, sleek uniforms, and a glowing storefront sign. Customers started drifting away. Familiar faces vanished. The cheerful sound of Ben's cart bell faded. The morning air felt colder, and for the first time in many months, Ben felt something slipping through his fingers. Facing competition, growing as a person, Eric's arrival swept through the quiet little town like a storm. His bakery was dazzling bright LED signs, elegantly decorated cakes displayed like pieces of art. Compared to Ben's old cart and his simple, rustic loaves, everything across the street seemed almost too perfect. One by one, customers drifted away. Even familiar faces no longer stopped by as often. In those first few days, Ben often sat quietly beside his cart, watching the steady flow of people head toward the new shop. One night, he stood in front of a mirror, looking deeply at himself and asked, "Has everything I've done so far been enough to keep this dream alive?" But Ben didn't let himself drown in despair for long. He wasn't born to give up. Instead of complaining or feeling bitter, he began to listen, not just to the compliments, but especially to the criticisms, the little suggestions he once ignored. Each piece of feedback became a valuable lesson, every comment a guiding light. He started with the smallest detail, his cart. He cleaned it, gave it a fresh coat of paint, added small flower pots, and crafted a handmade sign that read, "Ben's Bakes, homemade from the heart." He studied cake decorating, learning how to blend colors and shapes so each cake wasn't just tasty, but also visually delightful. Every evening after selling, he studied baking videos, took notes, and tested new recipes late into the night. Slowly, customers began to notice something different about Ben. It wasn't the price, and not even just the taste. It was the sincerity. They felt heard. They felt valued. Every loaf carried the quiet persistence of someone who never once complained, who kept pushing forward. And then one by one, they started coming back. Not in a rush, not with fanfare, but enough for Ben to realize something. Trust might take time, but once it blooms, it's deeply rooted. Ben didn't just win back old customers, he inspired them to spread his story. Ben's bread wasn't just food, it was a symbol of resilience, of a young man who rose up when life tried to push him down. A major setback, the bakery fire. It was a stormy night. Rain pounded the rooftops of the quiet little town, and thunder echoed like a warning in the dark sky. While most people stayed in their homes, Ben had been working late, checking his ovens and preparing for tomorrow's fresh batch. Just hours after he left, a loud explosion shook the silence. Flames erupted from his small bakery. By the time Ben arrived, the fire was already eating away at everything he'd built. The smell of smoke, the flicker of dying flames, the soaking rain, it all blended into one surreal moment. His ovens were gone. The counters scorched, the place that held his hopes, his tireless journey, reduced to ashes. He stood there, drenched and motionless. This wasn't just a bakery, it was his dream. And in one stormy night, it had all burned down. But Ben didn't collapse. After the silence came resolve. That same night, he took out a notebook, sat at his kitchen table, and wrote 3 simple words. Rebuild from nothing. Support from the community. By sunrise, the town had heard. But what came next, no one could have predicted. One by one, people arrived not with empty hands, but full hearts. Bags of flour, sticks of butter, jars of sugar, and small envelopes with folded bills. Others brought cleaning supplies, tools, or just quiet hands to help him rebuild. Ben never turned away anyone, one elderly man said. It's our turn to stand by him. Ben was moved beyond words. With whatever equipment he could salvage, he began baking from home again. No matter how small the oven or how heavy the day, he delivered every order, because that's who Ben was, a man of his word, even when it hurt. Rebirth, grand reopening of the bakery. Months passed. Through relentless hard work, every saved dollar, and the love of his community, Ben rebuilt his bakery. But this time it was not a copy of the old. It was a transformation. The new bakery was warm and inviting. Soft lights glowed behind wide glass windows. Handcrafted wooden shelves displayed rows of golden muffins, delicate cupcakes, and heart-shaped loaves, a design inspired by his little sister Sophie. A new sign hung proudly above the door, Ben's Heart Oven, from fire to flavor. And on opening day, something incredible happened. The town mayor himself came to speak. With a voice steady and full of pride, he said, Ben isn't just a baker. He's a symbol of what it means to rise. When flames took everything, he didn't mourn the loss he built again with stronger hands and a fuller heart. Today we celebrate not just a bakery, but the courage to begin again. The crowd erupted in applause. And as Ben stood there, surrounded by the scent of cinnamon and fresh bread, he knew he had not just rebuilt a bakery. He had lit a fire in the hearts of everyone who ever doubted their power to start over. At the grand reopening of his bakery, as the townspeople gathered and the air buzzed with excitement, Ben stepped onto a small wooden platform outside his shop. With steady eyes and a voice full of emotion, he spoke. Nothing in life is free, not success, not love, not respect. Everything must be earned through patience, through hard work, and above all, through faith. Faith in yourself, even when no one else believes in you. The crowd stood still for a moment. Then came the applause, not just for the bread he had baked, but for the spirit he had ignited. Ben's story quickly outgrew the small town. It became a living symbol of hope, of relentless dreams, and of the power of perseverance. Whenever someone felt like giving up, they only had to look at Ben, the boy who walked through fire, faced failure head-on, and came back stronger than ever. Dreams aren't free. They don't appear out of thin air. They are born through sacrifices, through waking up at 4 a.m. when the whole world sleeps, through walking in the rain just to keep your word to a customer. Ben, dreams are the most valuable thing in this world. But do you know something? They aren't free. He paused. Ben's eyes widened. Not free? He repeated, not fully grasping what his father meant. If Ben's story has touched your heart, if it sparked even a flicker of light inside your journey, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to Kunzy Podcast English, where we bring you powerful, real stories each week, not just to listen to, but to live by, to act on, and to believe in yourself a little more each day. Because sometimes, just one story at the right moment can change someone's entire life. Kunzy Podcast English, your journey begins here.